wasn't hiding in the shadows. He was flying helicopters for the United States Army, earning medals, raising children, living in quiet neighborhoods where no one locked their doors because they didn't think they had to. Robert Lee Yates Jr. looked like the last man anyone would suspect. To his neighbors, he was a family man. To the military, a skilled pilot trusted with lives and machines worth millions of dollars. To Spokane, just another face in traffic, another driver passing through East Sprague Avenue after dark. But for more than 20 years, something else followed him home. Between 1975 and 1998, at least 16 people would disappear, most of them women living on the margins, women whose names rarely made headlines, women police quietly labeled as high risk. They didn't vanish in one burst of violence. They vanished slowly, one by one, over decades. Bodies were found in fields, in wooded areas, in shallow graves just far enough away that no one stumbled across them by accident. Each time the story sounded familiar. A woman last seen getting into a vehicle, a gunshot wound to the head, plastic bags pulled tight, meant to silence, to erase, to make sure no one heard the end. And still, no suspect. While task forces searched for a monster, the man they were looking for went to work, put on a uniform, came home to dinner, kissed his children goodnight. No screaming neighbors, no criminal record that raised alarms. Just a trail of lives quietly cut short and left behind. Tonight we begin the story of how an American city failed to see what was right in front of it. This is Unsaid Case Files, and this is the man no one suspected. Before the murders, before the uniforms, before the gunshots in the dark, there was a boy growing up in Oak Harbor, Washington. Robert Lee Yates Jr. was born on May 27, 1952, into what appeared to be a stable, middle-class family. They attended a local Seventh-day Adventist church. From the outside, it looked orderly, disciplined, moral. But violence already existed in his bloodline. In 1945, 7 years before Yates was born, his grandmother murdered his grandfather with an axe. The crime wasn't whispered about in newspapers decades later. It simply became part of the family history, a shadow no one liked to acknowledge. Yates grew up quiet, reserved, not known for trouble. No teachers flagged him. No neighbors warned anyone. In 1970, he graduated from Oak Harbor High School and stepped into adulthood without incident. No criminal record, no red flags. Just a young man blending easily into society. By 1975, he was working as a correctional officer at the Washington State Penitentiary in Walla Walla, a prison. A place built around control, authority, and punishment. It was there that Yates learned how systems work, how people behave when they're powerless, how violence can exist behind locked doors without being seen by the outside world. And it was that same year, while wearing the badge of law and order, that 2 college students were shot to death during a picnic near Walla Walla. At the time, no one connected the dots. No one imagined that a man trusted to guard inmates might one day become far worse than the people he watched over. But the foundation was already set. A family history stained by violence, a career rooted in authority, and a man learning how easily society looks away. In October of 1977, Robert Lee Yates Jr. didn't drift into chaos. He enlisted in the United States Army. For Yates, the military offered everything he valued: structure, discipline, authority, and most importantly, trust. He trained as an aircraft pilot, earning certification to fly both civilian transport planes and helicopters. He wasn't just competent, he was good. Good enough to be stationed overseas. Good enough to fly missions in Germany. Good enough to be deployed during United Nations peacekeeping operations in Somalia and Haiti in the 1990s. He earned commendations, service medals, eventually the Master Aviator Badge. To his superiors, Yates was dependable, calm under pressure, a man you trusted in the cockpit when lives were on the line. Back home, he was a husband and a father of 5, 4 daughters, 1 son. The image of stability. But authority can be a powerful disguise. The uniform opened doors. It lowered suspicion. It made people feel safe around him. And for the women he would later target, it made him believable. A military man offering a ride. A pilot who spoke confidently. A father who talked about his kids. Between deployments and duty stations, Yates learned something else: how to live in 2 worlds without either one touching the other. By the mid-1990s, he left active duty, just short of full retirement, but was granted benefits anyway as the military downsized. He didn't stop flying. He joined the Army National Guard as a helicopter pilot. To the outside world, his life looked full. But somewhere between cockpits and command structures, the violence that had waited quietly for years was about to resurface. And this time, it wouldn't stop. Long before Spokane knew fear, long before patterns and task forces, 2 young lives were cut short on a summer afternoon. In July of 1975, Patrick Oliver and Susan Savage were college students. They were young, in love, and spending the day exactly how college kids do, on a picnic near Walla Walla, Washington. They never came home. The next day, their bodies were found in a remote area. Both had been shot in the head. No robbery, no struggle. Just execution-style gunshot wounds and silence. At the time, police searched for motives that made sense. A jealous lover. A random act of violence. Someone passing through. What they didn't consider was proximity. Because that same year, Robert Lee Yates Jr. was working just miles away as a correctional officer at the Washington State Penitentiary in Walla Walla. A man sworn to uphold order. A man trusted with keys, control, and authority. There was no forensic technology then to link him to the scene. No DNA databases. No behavioral profiling taken seriously. And so the murders went cold. For years, Patrick and Susan's deaths remained an isolated tragedy, unconnected to anything else. No suspect, no arrest, no justice. But what investigators didn't know was that this wasn't a one-time eruption. It was a test of control, a test of silence, a test to see if he could kill and keep living like nothing happened. He could. And because no one caught him, no one even suspected him, the violence didn't disappear. It waited. By the late 1980s and into the 1990s, Spokane had a stretch of road everyone knew, but few wanted to talk about. East Sprague Avenue. At night, it became a corridor of survival. Sex work, addiction, people living moment to moment, hoping to make it to the next morning. It was here that Robert Lee Yates Jr. found the perfect hunting ground. He didn't force his way into their lives. He blended in. Yates would cruise the avenue in his van, offering drugs, conversation, money. He didn't rush. He didn't threaten. He made himself seem safe. A military man, a pilot, a father, someone who understood. After sex, often inside the van, the illusion ended. The gun came out, a small caliber handgun. One shot to the head, sometimes the heart. Quick, controlled, final. Then came the plastic bags, pulled tight over faces, not to kill, but to erase, to silence, to strip identity. Bodies were dumped in fields, wooded areas, shallow graves just far enough away to avoid discovery for weeks, sometimes months. The victims were often labeled the same way in reports: high risk, transient, known to police. And because of that, their disappearances didn't trigger alarms. Different names, different locations, different years. No obvious connection, at least not one anyone was looking hard enough to find. But a pattern was forming. A consistent weapon. A consistent method. A man returning to the same places again and again, confident that no one was counting. By 1996, something changed. For years, the violence had been spaced out, long gaps that kept each killing isolated. But now the deaths were coming faster, closer together, more careless. Robert Lee Yates Jr. was no longer waiting years between murders. He didn't need to. He had learned the system well enough to trust it wouldn't stop him. On May 27, 1996, the body of Shannon Zielinski was found in a wooded area near Meade, Washington. She had been shot in the head and left partially nude. Her body was badly decomposed. The story sounded familiar, but still, no connection was made. Then came 1997. Heather Hernandez was found in an overgrown lot in Spokane, shot just days earlier. She was only 20 years old, new to the area, barely known. 10 days later, Jennifer Joseph was found in a field, 16 years old, shot in the head, left like the others. Joseph had been in Spokane for just 1 month. The pattern was there, clear and repeating, but investigators were still chasing individual cases, not a single man. Yates continued living his life openly. He went to work. He flew helicopters. He went home to his family. Meanwhile, the victims kept coming. Darla Scott was found buried in a shallow grave near a golf course. Gunshot wound to the head. Each scene echoed the last. Same execution. Same silence. Same indifference. But now the volume was impossible to ignore. Detectives began to whisper the word serial. And as pressure grew, Yates didn't slow down. He accelerated. By the end of 1997, the killings were no longer spread across years. They were piling up. Bodies began appearing closer together, sometimes within a mile of each other, dumped like refuse in gullies, fields, and shallow graves. Robert Lee Yates Jr. had settled into a routine. Shoot, bag, discard. In December, Melinda Mercer was found in Tacoma, shot multiple times, plastic bags pulled over her head. Even after being shot, she had fought, chewing through 2 of the bags before dying. Then came Sean Johnson. Then Sean McClenahan. Then Lori Wason. All shot in the head. All wrapped in plastic bags. Some were found together, some just days apart. The bags weren't about killing anymore. They were about control, silencing the victim, removing their face, making them anonymous. Police now knew they were dealing with a serial killer, but knowing that didn't mean knowing who. The victims' lives were often reduced to footnotes: drug use, sex work, prior arrests. But behind those labels were mothers, sisters, daughters. Lori Wason had a son. She had been sober for years before relapse pulled her back onto the streets. Sean McClenahan had just been accepted into a methadone program. She was trying to leave that life behind. They were killed anyway. As winter set in, the city grew uneasy. Someone was hunting. Someone was confident. And still, he went home every night. On August 1st, 1998, something happened that had never happened before. A woman lived. Christine Smith went to police after being assaulted and robbed during a sex act. She said the man struck her in the head, stole from her, and left her disoriented and bleeding. At first, she thought she had been hit. She didn't realize she'd been shot. Doctors later found bullet fragments still embedded in her hair. Smith described her attacker in chilling detail. A man around 50, sandy blonde hair, about 5 feet 10 inches, driving a black van with wood paneling, bucket seats, and a raised bed. And then came the detail that should have ended everything. He told her he was a National Guard helicopter pilot. He said he had 5 children. That description matched Robert Lee Yates Jr. almost perfectly. But nothing happened. Yates was questioned later that year and asked to provide a DNA sample. He refused. He told police it was too extreme for a family man to be treated like a suspect. And police let him walk away. The chance was there. The evidence was forming. The survivor had spoken. But the system hesitated. Weeks later, more women were dead. It wouldn't be until Yates's face appeared in the newspaper after his eventual arrest that Christine Smith would recognize him and come forward again. She was the only one who got away. And her survival showed just how close this case came to ending sooner. By the year 2000, the pressure was finally closing in. Detectives were no longer chasing isolated murders. They were hunting one man. And then came a mistake. Witnesses had described a white Chevrolet Corvette seen with one of the victims. Police were actively searching for it when an officer stopped a matching vehicle. The report, however, listed the car as a Camaro. One word, one error. The stop was dismissed, and Robert Lee Yates Jr. drove away. But the case didn't die. On April 18, 2000, Yates was arrested for the murder of 16-year-old Jennifer Joseph. This time, police didn't miss their chance. They seized the Corvette. Inside, they found blood. Forensic testing linked that blood to Joseph. And then something unprecedented happened. Yates' DNA was matched to 12 other victims. The pattern was no longer theory, it was science. Faced with overwhelming evidence, Yates confessed. He admitted to killing women across Washington for decades. He led investigators to burial sites, including one victim buried beneath his own bedroom window. In exchange for avoiding the death penalty, he pleaded guilty to 13 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of attempted murder. The sentence? 408 years in prison. For the first time, families had answers. But the case wasn't finished yet, because 2 murders in Pierce County still remained, and the state wanted death. In 2002, Robert Lee Yates Jr. was sentenced to death for 2 additional murders in Pierce County. For a moment, it seemed final. But justice, like the system that failed his victims for decades, moved slowly. Years of appeals followed. Arguments about mental illness, about fairness, about whether the death penalty itself was constitutional. Then, in 2018, everything changed. The Washington Supreme Court ruled capital punishment unconstitutional. Every death sentence in the state was overturned. Yates' punishment became life in prison without the possibility of parole. No release, no second chance, no redemption. He remains incarcerated at the Washington State Penitentiary, alive, while at least 16 victims are not. And that's the part that lingers. Because this case was never just about one man. It was about who society protects and who it ignores. About how authority can shield predators. About how long violence can continue when victims are dismissed as disposable. The women Yates killed were more than labels, more than case numbers. They were mothers, daughters, sisters, people trying to survive. Their lives mattered. And remembering them is the only way stories like this don't fade into statistics. If you're listening to this, thank you for bearing witness. If this story moved you, follow the show, subscribe wherever you listen, and share this episode so these names aren't forgotten. Supporting Unsaid Case Files helps us keep telling the stories others stop talking about. Because the most dangerous crimes are the ones no one wants to see. This has been Unsaid Case Files. And we'll see you in the next case.